Get ready, daughter. Today I'm going to introduce you to Wallace, Sherelle said, scrutinizing herself in the mirror. Mum, why do we need him? I love you, you love me, and we're happy together, little Melissa objected seriously. With difficulty, hiding a smile in the corners of her mouth, Sherelle was surprised at how clever her daughter had become. She's only 10, and she thinks like an adult, thought the woman, for whom her little girl had been the meaning of life all this time. Then, looking at Melissa with a slight reproachful glance, she said, My dear, maybe it's good for us to be together, but you need a father, and I need a husband. Sherelle raised her daughter alone, paying for the mistakes of her youth when she fell in love with a travelling biker. Now, of course, she understood that this relationship was a mistake, but the past could not be undone. But every cloud has a silver lining. If Victor hadn't left her then, she might have remained the librarian, an inconspicuous grey mouse, living from paycheck to paycheck. Instead, left alone with her little daughter, she had to use all her mental and physical abilities, revealing a hidden potential that Sherelle had never even suspected before. She was an orphan relying only on herself. The school of life that she had to go through in the orphanage hardened her character, instilling confidence in her. After she found herself in a difficult situation, to her surprise, she discovered a passion for commerce and business. Sherelle started by distributing advertising brochures and selling flowers. Then, the determined young woman moved into the beauty and cosmetics industry, working her way up from a simple manicurist to the owner of her own beauty salon. The first success and the first money inspired Sherelle, and after a while she strengthened her position in this business. Now she stood firmly on her own 2 feet, with a network of beauty salons. But there was a negative side to all of this. Without any constraints on her means, Sherelle was terribly lonely and dreamed of a reliable life partner. It hurt her to lie down in a cold, empty bed and greet the dawn alone. Sherelle wanted romance, flowers for no reason, and morning kisses from her beloved. So when she met Wallace, she immediately decided that this was her chance to be happy, and she couldn't miss it. Wallace, a representative and charming brunette, looking at her from a photo on a dating site, instantly won Sherelle's heart. Communicating on the internet, Sherelle caught herself thinking that she felt very comfortable with the young man, whom she considered the ideal of a real man in absentia. At the beginning of their acquaintance, Wallace behaved somewhat strangely. The man had already scheduled meetings in restaurants or cafes, but at the very last moment he always cancelled them, citing personal problems and a heavy workload at work. Sherelle's dissatisfaction reached its peak when Wallace once again scheduled a meeting at a cafe around the corner. Anxiously looking around at the screen of her mobile phone, the woman was waiting for her virtual suitor to cancel the meeting again, but to her surprise, it didn't happen. Wallace met them at the entrance to the cafe with a bouquet of roses for Sherelle and a small plush teddy bear for Melissa. The girl took the gift in her hands with distrust. Although Wallace wanted to seem good and caring, Melissa didn't really like him. The girl felt his hostility and insincerity. He was like a carnival clown who, while smiling broadly at customers, felt absolutely no feelings for them. All evening, Wallace joked and told interesting stories, which brought Sherelle indescribable delight. She hadn't had such a good time in a long time, feeling like she was on cloud 9 from happiness. When it was time to leave and pay for dinner, Wallace suddenly hesitated, complaining that he had lost his wallet somewhere. "Wallace, forget about it. I don't even want to hear about it. I'll pay for everything now," generously said Sherelle, leaving a very generous tip for the waiter. Wallace escorted Sherelle and Melissa to their home, where they warmly said goodbye, exchanging sweet cheek kisses. "So how do you like Wallace, Melissa?" asked Sherelle when they entered the apartment. "Mum, I don't like him. He's sly and his eyes are cold. Oh, come on, my dear. How could you, a little girl, know about men's eyes? Well, okay, go brush your teeth and go to bed. It's already late, commanded Cherelle, not taking her daughter's words seriously. And little Melissa, hiding under the covers with her head, silently prayed that her mum wouldn't be friends with Wallace. She didn't like him at all, and his jokes were not understandable or funny. Thomas from next door is a different story. What a man! What a great man! He fixed my bike and replaced the tyre when I hit a nail, and his son Todd is such a good friend. I can trust him with secrets and ask for help if needed. Oh, it's a pity that my mum doesn't know Thomas, thought Melissa, tossing and turning in bed. She and Todd had been friends since kindergarten, and Melissa often visited his house. Thomas loved animals very much, and they had 2 cats, a little dog, and even fish in an aquarium that took up about half of the wall in the living room. There used to be a turtle named Tortilla, but since she was lonely, Thomas released her to be with her kind in the city pond. As she drifted off to sleep, Melissa thought, oh, if only Mum and Thomas could become friends, that would be great. But the girl didn't know that Cherelle had fallen in love with Wallace at first sight. It happens when you meet someone and like everything about them. The man didn't talk much about himself, saying that he had been a newcomer and that he had achieved everything by himself, working as a manager for some company on the outskirts of the city. Wallace knew how to impress and show himself in the best light. Flowers, gifts, and restaurants followed one another with remarkable regularity. Cherelle, who felt an incredible surge of emotion, was ready to follow him to the ends of the earth, and finally they were headed for marriage. However, her friends advised Cherelle not to rush into marriage, saying, "Why tie yourself down? Just live together for now. Many people do it this way. It's simple and reliable. If something happens, you can just go your separate ways. No courts or divorce proceedings." But Cherelle simply waved this away, thinking that her friends were just envious of her happiness. Of course, they would like to have such a handsome man for themselves. Everyone knows how to envy. Usually men don't insist on marriage, but Wallace twisted and turned like a snake to convince Cherelle that they needed to legalize their relationship. "Sweetie, why are we like little children meeting in hotels all the time? Let's live together already, like all normal people. Let's have a baby, a cat and a dog." These words brought tears to Cherelle's eyes, and she threw herself into the arms of her beloved. "He's my sweet and only destiny. What other doubts could there be?" thought Cherelle, agreeing with Wallace about the need for a quick marriage. They had a grand wedding, and Cherelle spared no expense. She wanted this event to remain in her memory forever. After the wedding ceremony, the newlyweds moved into a new spacious apartment that Cherelle had purchased specifically for this purpose. And she also gave her husband a truly luxurious wedding gift, buying him a brand new sports car. Perhaps at her mum's wedding only Melissa felt sad, because she understood that Wallace was not as simple as he seemed. But when you are only 10 years old, it's difficult to go against your parents' will, so Melissa had to accept it and move on. Time passed quickly, and 6 months went by like a day. Melissa and her stepfather never developed a trusting relationship. Deep down, they didn't love each other. "Todd, you know, my new dad is strange. He often disappears when my mum's at work, spends money left and right, and wants a new car even better than the last one," Melissa said, wanting to share her deepest thoughts with her friend. "Well, he can do that because he's rich, but my dad works at the factory, and he can only buy me a toy car," Todd said, sighing sadly. His mother died many years ago, and his father raised him alone, neglecting his personal life in an effort to provide for his son. And then once, Melissa accidentally overheard a very strange conversation Wallace had on the phone. That day, on her way to the playground, she realized she had forgotten her ball and had to go back for it. Quietly opening the front door, she immediately heard Wallace's loud voice coming from the bedroom. "Yes, Pam, everything is fine." "Well, of course I missed you. What's the matter? Tomorrow my witch will go on a business trip, and then we'll have some fun. Yeah, I love you. Kisses, kitten." After hearing all of this, Melissa blushed and ran out, slamming the door. She sat in the playground almost until the evening, crying and wiping away tears from her face. She probably would have spent the whole night there too, if she hadn't been picked up by her mum coming home from work. "What happened? Why are you crying? Who hurt you, my dear?" her mum asked. Mum, something happened," the girl mumbled, recounting everything she had involuntarily heard. After listening to Melissa, her mother became as dark as a cloud. That evening, a serious conversation took place between Sherelle and Wallace in the kitchen. "Darling, why don't you believe me? Understand that I love you, and I have no reason to lie to you. Do you believe me or your little liar? Don't you know that children at that age love to fantasize? So don't take the arguments of a 10-year-old girl as gospel truth." "Well, and if you don't believe me, let's get divorced," Wallace said cunningly, emphasizing the last sentence. "Well, okay. I admit that maybe I overreacted. Jealousy got the best of me. Everything piled up on me at once, and it was a bad day at work. In short, I'm sorry. You're not to blame for anything," Sherelle said shyly, hugging her beloved husband. Since then, Wallace had harboured a grudge against his stepdaughter, considering her responsible for all his troubles. Once, when Melissa was alone with him, he said, "Listen, you little brat, if you say one more word against me, I'll strangle you first and then your mother. Don't meddle in my affairs, and keep your mouth shut. So, little bird, live for now, but don't chirp." After these words, Melissa was finally convinced that Wallace was not who he pretended to be. Understanding that her mother would no longer believe her words, the girl decided to act more decisively. Melissa started to monitor her stepfather closely, intending to gather evidence of his lies. She had already noticed more than once that Wallace took the keys to their old apartment for some reason, and stayed there for a long time. She followed him and saw he was going there with some woman. Melissa shared her suspicions with her friend Todd. "I know he's up to no good, but I can't prove it. Mum won't believe me anymore. While she's away on business trips, he's blatantly deceiving her. It hurts me so much for my mum," said the girl. "Listen, let's put a camera there," Todd suggested. "We have one. Dad installed it on the staircase landing. Someone used to spray paint and leave drawings." "What if it doesn't work?" asked the girl. "Don't worry. I saw how Dad set it up. It's very simple. No more complicated than digging around on a smartphone," reassured Todd, who wanted to help Melissa in trouble. The next day, the kids set out to implement their plan. Knowing that Wallace usually goes to the apartment mainly after noon, the children took the keys and installed the camera in the morning. Feeling like spies, the kids happily giggled and shook hands. "Well, now you can keep the record on your computer or on your phone at your will in general. By the way, I consulted with Daddy. I told him that we needed to watch squirrels in the park," Todd said. Now they could only hope that everything would work out. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait long. After lunch, Wallace went to the old apartment, where he stayed almost until the evening. And the next morning, Melissa gave her mother a flash drive with a video recording. She had just returned from a business trip. "What is this, daughter? Your next artwork?" Sherelle asked incredulously. "Mum, there's a recording with Wallace. I didn't watch it myself, it's for you. In general, you'll understand," Melissa said. Intrigued, Sherelle threw the flash drive into her pocket, but she could only watch the recording on her work laptop. After seeing everything, her face changed instantly, and she turned pale. Waiting until evening, Sherelle took Melissa from school and went straight to her old apartment to check on it. When she opened the front door, she saw a half-naked woman in the hallway whom her husband Wallace was hugging. "Get out of here, both of you. You have no business here. Forget about me and my family." An angry Sherelle screamed. She couldn't wrap her head around such treachery. Quickly getting dressed, Wallace's mistress quietly slipped out of the apartment. But the hero-lover, on the contrary, behaved rudely and clearly did not intend to leave the apartment. "But why are you staring at me? Did you think you could buy me? Yeah? Hold your pockets wider. It's all your little brat's fault, but it's okay, I'll get to you quickly," Wallace growled, intending to grab Melissa by the hair, but Cherelle stood up to defend her daughter. "Oh, you're like that? Well, fool, you'll get it too," the man said. After the revelation of his cheating, he was left with nothing to lose. A fight broke out, with Wallace having the upper hand due to his strength. Poor Melissa ran crying to the neighbours to call for help. Luckily, Todd and Thomas were home and immediately responded to the girl's call. Wallace had already knocked Cherelle to the floor, gripping her throat with a deadly grip. But fortunately help arrived just in time. Thomas delivered dozens of punches to Wallace, although he himself was hit hard too. Wallace was literally crazed with anger, and his strength would have been enough for 10 people. Finally, they managed to subdue the cheating husband with great effort. Meanwhile, Cherelle called the police and immediately provided testimony on the scene. Wallace now faced a real prison sentence for assault and attempted murder. Cherelle apologized to Melissa for not trusting her and not believing her the first time. The woman also wanted to thank Thomas and give him the car she had bought for Wallace, but to her great surprise, the man refused. "You know, if you don't mind, the best way to thank me would be a modest dinner at the cafe on the embankment. They have great cuisine and the place is gorgeous." Cherelle, who needed a sharp change of scenery after this shock, agreed with pleasure. They went to the cafe with Todd and Melissa. The children frolicked happily, laughing and sailing paper boats that Thomas skillfully made from paper napkins. Cherelle didn't know that the charming man had been in love with her for a long time, but was afraid to admit it, ashamed of his poverty. Of course, a woman couldn't forget Wallace right away. Ahead of her were divorce and a trial against her ex-husband. After that recording on the flash drive, something broke in Cherelle's heart, and the romantic haze scattered in her head. Now the woman no longer believed in sweet words, preferring to trust reliable people like Thomas. Feelings for Thomas didn't spark in one moment, and it took a lot of time before Cherelle felt ready for a new relationship. Thomas didn't try to deceive or flatter her, but simply made a manly proposal of marriage, which the woman loved. Cherelle, of course, agreed, to the great joy of Todd and Melissa, who used to consider themselves brother and sister and could now rightfully call themselves that. Melissa and Thomas didn't have a lavish wedding. Instead, they modestly signed at the registry office. Thomas became a reliable support for Cherelle, helping her with her business vision. Comfort, love, and abundance now reign in their family. Comfort, love, and abundance now reign in their family.